Hello everybody, welcome back to a new video, and today I want to go over my vocal processing and the way I do that. I have a few tracks coming up with examples, and we're gonna go over some of the things I usually do to vocals in this video. So let's go into it. Alright, so as you can see here we have two vocal samples. We have this, let me quickly turn this off, we have this loud spoken voice here in my mind, which is just me, and we also have the whisper version in my mind, and I tend to use both differently. And yeah, so I'm going to do processing to this and kind of show you what I'm doing. Now the first thing you will hear is that there is actually background noise from my PC from when I recorded this in my mind. Let me see if I can... You can hear it at the start, so I kind of want to show you exactly what I mean by kind of taking this and looping. As you can hear that kind of noise there. So that's the first thing we have to deal with. And the first thing I do is usually cut off as much of it as I can, so really zoom into the wave. And this is a good way to do that if you have a bad recording setup like me. And I will give it just a little fade in, and here we have to see exactly where we have to fade it out. So I want this "the" sound here, because that actually makes up the word here. So we're gonna go just behind this, like here. And again, give it a small fade out. Mind. So that's that. Now let's consolidate this. We still have some of the actual noise inside the sample here. It's not so noticeable in this spoken version, but it will be more noticeable here. But this is something we can work with. So the second step I usually do is to kind of normalize all the sounds, or normalize the whole sample. That's not really possible here, because as you can see it's basically one long tone. But there is this click at the end which I want to be a little bit louder. Just a slightly bit louder. Let's put it up just a few dB here. In my mind. It's just a little click, and I want it to be, yeah, a little bit louder, so it's a little bit more profound. Now we can actually start adding effects to this whole thing. So I'm going to go up to my plugins, and the first effect I tend to throw on there is, if you go to your Melda plugin suite, if you have that, is a multi-band harmonizer. And there is this one particular preset I use on every vocal. And that's the stereo power chords, either the adaptive one or the non-adaptive one. And this is a very cool preset that just adds a little bit of extra stereo harmonics. So you do need that plugin for it. I do believe there is a free version of it. I am not 100% certain about this. You would have to look that up on the Melda website. They do have a whole bunch of free plugins which you can use, but if you actually want to get this one, I don't know if there's a free version of this particular plugin here. But there are probably other harmonizing tools you can use to get this effect, even by making extra harmonies yourself and then hard panning them or stuff like that. So there's a few ways to do this. This is just the easiest one for me. So now that we have done this, what I tend to do is I want to make it distinguishable to be not my voice anymore. So I don't want it to sound like me, which is kind of strange. Normally you want the singer or the voice to be the clearest as possible in a mix, but I tend to do the opposite. So I'm actually going to consolidate this so we can work with one nice sample here. And then I'm going to transpose it. The first thing I do is set it to texture mode, and we're gonna play with the grain size and the flux later. So I'm gonna, for example, transpose it -4. Let's see what that does. In my mind. In my mind. Let's say that I like that. And so what I then do is I kind of work with the flux. I tend to set the flux a little bit higher, and then I set the grain size to maximum. And then what we can do is we can go over here and actually draw in a nice shape. So what this is this is the percentage of this thing. So if you put this halfway, let's say you put it here, then 100% will be this number. I think I've explained this before in a different tutorial where I also use this technique to kind of resample sounds. If I find it, I'll put a card up on the screen or something. But what this means is that 100% is this value here, and then 0% would be the grain size all the way down. So by setting it all the way up, we basically have the full range, and we can just work with this as if this were a actual value slider from, yeah, basically the highest value to the lowest value, which is very nice to have. So I'm just going to go down here, maybe let's see what that sounds like. It's a little bit trial and error. There is not really a fixed process I do. It's obviously dependent on the sample, which is my main takeaway from this video, is that it really would depend on what sample you use and how that sounds. But maybe we can get a bit more of a profound effect if we do this, and then we go back up and then we turn this down a little bit more, maybe like this. That's a little bit too much. It doesn't really do too much. Maybe if we turn the flux down a little bit. It does sound really cool though. So yeah, then we go over to the next effect. Now that we have our main sound down, again, I put the harmonizer on there so it's easier to work with it in that order, instead of first pitching it and then throwing on the harmonizer. Then I have to go back and pitch it again. So I just throw on the preset that I always use, and then I can get to the end sound quicker. So the next thing, what I usually do is a little bit of EQing, just getting out some of those nasty frequencies. Getting it a little bit brighter. That's starting to sound almost where I want it to be. And then the final thing what I do is usually, if I have this put in a track, I will go into the pitch shift section and use an auto pitch to tune it to the track. Let's say we're working in G minor, which is a key I tend to use a lot. You have to go minor and then G, and then just get it a little bit more in tune with the rest of the track. That always seems to help. So that is a really cool way you can process your vocals. It gives this nice spacey stereo feeling. If you want it to be a little bit more mono because you're worried about the mono compatibility, you can always add a utility to this thing and turn it down a little bit. Maybe that's a bit too much. The final thing I would like to do, I'm going to turn the loop off for this, is just to add a quick delay and reverb. And I'm going to show you another cool trick you can use. So let's dial in some settings. I'm actually not going to play it because I want to show you a cool trick, which is where we only activate the delay on the last tone of the sound. So here we have this. If we quickly turn this off, we can identify the last part of the sound, like the last tone, which would be, yeah, would be around there. I would go in and only turn the delay on there, so you get this nice little, you get that nice little sound, maybe a little bit earlier so that it actually takes up the whole thing. It's kind of dependent on And then I'll like to dial it down so it doesn't get as clicky as it's here. And then finally the reverb, just to add a little bit more space. You have a nice little washed out vocal which you can use in your tracks. So next for the whisper, I tackled this a little bit differently. Still use the same preset in the Harmoniser, so I'm just going to throw that on there so that we're clear on this. I tend to, instead of pitching it down, I tend to pitch the whispers up here by 12 semitones. And again, we're going to use texture mode. I'm not going to dial in the exact settings here. I'm also going to quickly get rid of this and this here. I'm going to add a little fade out and a little fade in. Maybe 12 is a little bit too much here. That's probably okay. Actually, what I'm going to do before this is I'm going to go before here, and I want to get rid of all the low frequencies, as well as this. Kind of normalize the spectrum a little bit, and yeah, make sure that there are no piercing frequencies in there. And then what I do is I take the transformer here and I select the default preset, and with the default preset you get this pitch shift. And what I do then is I actually basically shift it again, so like -3. I usually don't shift it down to the same pitch again, but to a little bit down, so this actually works on a like a transposed signal to what we're actually going for. So you get a nice airy sound because it's going in here with more high frequencies, so it kind of works on a different spectrum, which is a really cool trick. You can use this trick in a lot of sound design, which is basically you turn a signal up or down, maybe even like an octave or something, then you apply some processing, and then you do the same transformation but in a different direction to bring it back into the same key that it was before, which is a really cool trick. Also in other sound designs like atmospheric sounds, that works really well as effect sounds, and maybe even a lead sound. I've done it in the Avalon and Tristan remix. I used that for one of the main leads in there. Yeah, so now it's just a matter again of adding the delay and the reverb. And here it's really clear where the last tone is, because that's exactly starting here. So what we have to do is just zoom in to this, and I tend to turn it on just before that tone starts, so you kind of get that whoosh whiff there. Now what you can do if you find this effect a little bit too harsh is you can pull down on the dry wet here. I think that will help a little bit. It also gives you back a bit more of the mono signal, and now we have a nice little airy vocal which you can use again in your track. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. A little bit of insight in how I do my vocals, and if you have any suggestions for future tutorials, feel free to let me know, and I hope to see you next time. Bye bye.